He is a master in the history of American prison escapes, known as the most skilled escape artist in the U.S. His life's motto was simple: either escape or die. For an ordinary person, one escape is enough to be featured in a documentary. But he managed to pull it off 3 times. 3 times, he shocked the nation, and each attempt was more outrageous than the last. His final escape was particularly ingenious. He mailed himself out of prison, becoming a legend in escape history. You'd think that's as wild as it gets. But there's more. Right after escaping, he was stopped by the police. But with his extreme confidence, a mind so calm it was almost psychopathic, and an Oscar-worthy performance, he completely convinced the officers to let him go. This famous encounter went viral online, viewed by over 40 million people. No matter how many times you watch it, you can't help but hold your breath for him every time. Even a real Oscar-winning actor, upon seeing his performance, would likely feel inadequate. Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. I'm DarkCaseX. So, how incredible is the story of this escape artist? Let's travel back to 1958 and listen to the story of America's most skilled escape artist. Richard Lee McNair, born on December 19, 1958, was born into an ordinary family in Oklahoma. He was the eldest of 4 children. His father was a reserve police officer. His parents were loving, and the family was harmonious. A typical American family. From a young age, Richard was bright and clever, with a sharp mind. He was known by everyone around him as a little genius. In his brother's words, "My brother is the smartest person I've ever met. He has always been my role model." As a teenager, Richard loved sports, excelled in his studies, and looked up to his father as a hero. Making military service his life goal, he eventually succeeded and became a member of the U.S. Air Force. In the military, he continued to perform exceptionally. Not only was he a competent soldier, he was also an informant for the local police, helping them crack several theft cases. At that time, he had no bad habits and seemed to have a bright future. If there was one flaw to point out, it was that he was a big spender and had no concept of saving money. And this very trait would become the trigger for the tragedy in his life. The turning point came on November 17, 1987. On this day, while stationed in North Dakota, at Minot Air Force Base, Richard had a sudden impulse to get some quick cash. He knew that there was a grain elevator near the base that was virtually empty at night. He thought that if he stealthily stole something valuable, he probably would get caught. But fate had other plans. He had just snuck into the grain elevator under the cover of night, when he ran right into the on-duty manager, Kitzman. Logically, he could have just turned and run, and nothing would have happened. But whether it was a soldier's instinctual alertness, or just extreme guilt and nervousness, without a second thought, he pulled out his service pistol and fired 4 shots at Kitzman. Seeing the man fall to the ground, bleeding, he forgot about stealing and turned to flee. But just as he reached the door, he saw a truck driver sitting in his cab. In a frenzy, Richard, without a word, fired several more shots at the driver. Then he vanished into the night. Over the next few weeks, although the police didn't come for him, he was constantly on edge, worried that he hadn't cleaned up the scene properly and might have left some clues. Sure enough, his fears came true. In fact, Kitzman, who had been shot 4 times that day, did not die. After being shot, he endured the intense pain, lay motionless on the ground, and played dead. After Richard left, he immediately called the police. Based on his testimony, and 10 shell casings found at the grain elevator, after a few weeks of investigation, they identified Richard as the suspect and checked his firearm, confirming it matched the shell casings left at the scene. With solid evidence, they arrested him immediately, facing charges of 1 murder and 1 attempted murder. As a soldier, he knew very well what his fate would be. A life sentence was almost certain, but he wasn't willing to accept it. He felt that he had always been diligent and that this tragedy was just a moment of poor judgment. He didn't want to be locked up for the rest of his life. What could he do? A crazy idea began to swirl in his mind. At that moment, the idea took root in his mind. In February 1988, during a routine interrogation, 3 detectives had him handcuffed to a chair in the Minot City Police Department interrogation room for questioning. In the middle of it, the 3 of them briefly left to answer a phone call, leaving Richard alone. He realized it was now or never. Coincidentally, he had a tube of lip balm in his pocket. He decisively took it out, and applied it to his wrists. Then, enduring excruciating pain, he forced his hands out of the handcuffs. Without hesitation, he burst out of the interrogation room and ran out of the police station. The officers quickly noticed and gave chase. Eventually, he was cornered on the roof of a 3-story apartment building. With no way out, he tried to use a tree branch to climb down, but the branch was rotten. He fell heavily from a height of 8.5 meters, fracturing his spine on the spot. The escape failed. This was his first prison break. Although it only lasted a few hours, it set the stage for the legend that was to come. After receiving medical treatment, he was sent to the Ward County Jail. Later, for murder and attempted murder, he was sentenced to 2 life terms, plus 30 years for burglary. He was then transferred to the high-security North Dakota State Penitentiary. However, right after his transfer, guards at Ward County Jail were inspecting his old cell and were shocked to find that 2 bricks in the wall had been almost completely chiseled through. Inside, they found escape tools like bedsheets. It was clear he had been planning another escape. Luckily, the prison transfer interrupted his spellcasting. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unthinkable. This time, he was sent to North Dakota's most secure prison. This facility is mainly for housing long-term, high-risk inmates. For many prisoners, this might be the end of the line. But Richard believed it was just the beginning of his escape legacy, because the moment he stepped into his cell, he was already planning his next escape, with meticulous preparation. At the North Dakota State Penitentiary, given Richard's prior escape attempt, the guards paid special attention to him, keeping him under strict watch. Coupled with the prison's already high security, the administration was confident that no one could escape. But Richard was determined to prove them wrong. He attributed his last failed escape to being too impulsive, reckless, and unplanned. So this time, he developed a detailed escape plan. The first step was naturally to clean up his image. He stopped causing trouble, didn't get involved in fights, was usually quiet, and always kept to himself. Smoking, drinking, getting tattoos, all typical inmate behaviors. He avoided them all. He was completely obedient to the guards. Eventually, even the guards felt he didn't seem like a serious offender, more like a student who had wandered into the wrong library. Next was regular exercise. An escape requires good physical fitness, so he exercised daily, rain or shine. During yard time, he ran. In his cell, he did push-ups and other strength training. Finally, he armed himself with knowledge. He believed that brute force alone wasn't enough for an escape. One needed various survival skills and related knowledge. Only then could any object be turned into a tool. Therefore, he loved going to the prison library and would stay for hours, immersed in various books and magazines, mainly focusing on wilderness survival skills, preparing for his ultimate plan. He prepared like this for nearly 3 years. By early 1991, Richard finally found an escape route: the ventilation shaft. At that time, the rooftops of the prison's industrial buildings were equipped with vents. Once through the vent, he wouldn't be far from the free world outside, but getting through this door to freedom was not easy. The tower guards would shoot on sight if they saw anyone. And inside the vent, there were numerous metal security grates. Under normal circumstances, it was impossible to get through. But Richard was patient. He teamed up with another inmate, and over several weeks, using their work opportunities, they dismantled these security devices bit by bit. The escape route was cleared. But unexpectedly, the night before they were set to act, they were reported by another inmate. On April 21st, 1991, the prison security chief, acting on the tip, inspected the ventilation shaft. Sure enough, they found that most of the security features had been removed. The guards quickly apprehended Richard and the other inmate. Richard was ultimately sentenced to another 3 years of solitary confinement. However, for someone already serving a life sentence, it didn't matter. Although this escape plan was thwarted, Richard was not discouraged. In fact, he became even more determined. Over the next 2 years, he went back to his old ways, maintaining his good guy image, while continuing to look for an escape route. After much searching, he once again set his sights on the ventilation shaft. Even though the prison had strengthened its defenses, Richard reasoned that the most dangerous place is often the safest. It's what they call hiding in plain sight. Friends who have seen Prison Break and The Shawshank Redemption will understand that escaping from prison alone is unrealistic. So he found 2 like-minded inmates The three of them worked in perfect concert. First, they figured out the guards, shift change patterns, the troll, blind spots, and so on. Then, covering for each other, step by step, they removed the plasterboard and metal mesh from the cell ceiling. They also precisely measured the route from the ceiling, ventilation duct into the main ventilation shaft, and then around to the roof of the prison's outer wall. To get down from the high wall to the ground, they also prepared many strips of cloth, tied together to make a rope. Everything was planned out perfectly. On the morning of October 9th, 1992, the three of them felt the time was right. While the prison education room was showing a movie for everyone, they secretly climbed into the ceiling and entered the main ventilation duct they had already explored. They crawled through over 30 meters of metal pipe, then followed the ventilation duct down to a platform inside the prison's outer wall. Then, using their homemade cloth rope, they scaled the high wall and escaped in different directions. The prison authorities didn't realize until 2 hours later and immediately launched a manhunt. His two fellow inmates were perhaps not as clever and were quickly recaptured. But Richard, with his strong counter-surveillance skills, completely vanished from under the police's noses. To evade the police manhunt, he disguised himself. He grew his hair long and dyed it blonde, wore glasses, and at first glance, had a scholarly look. Driving stolen cars, he wandered across America. He would change his appearance every so often, get a different car, and would never stay in one place for too long. Just like that, Richard lived freely on the outside, traveling for a full 10 months until July 5th, 1993, when he was finally caught in a police roundup. His second escape had also ended in failure. After arresting Richard this time, the North Dakota State Penitentiary understood one thing. Richard was no ordinary inmate. This man who could slip out of handcuffs in minutes and climb out of a prison through a ventilation duct was a major liability, and their solution was quite direct. Send him away, the farther the better. Subsequently, under an interstate agreement, Richard was sent to Oak Park Heights Correctional Facility. This prison is the highest security prison in Minnesota. Despite its security, no inmate in its history has ever escaped. Although Richard considered himself extraordinary, believing no prison could hold him, after a few years, he gradually realized, I can't escape from this prison. Faced with the fortress-like prison, he thought of another plan. Try a different prison. To achieve this, he organized other inmates to stage a sit-in strike. They refused to eat or work and rejected all communication with the authorities. The prison administration saw this was untenable. What if he dies on my watch? So they sent him back to North Dakota. But that state was well aware of him. Seeing the troublemaker return gave them a huge headache. They quickly sent him away again. This time, it was to an even stricter facility, a Florence Federal Correctional Complex in Colorado. This prison was also like an impregnable fortress. This caused Richard to break down again, as he saw almost no hope of escape. So, adhering to the principle of, if this place doesn't work, I'll try another one, he requested a transfer, citing the reason that he wanted to be closer to his family in Oklahoma. He asked for a transfer to the United States Penitentiary, Pollock, in Louisiana. This prison was also highly secure, housing serious federal offenders. The authorities felt he wouldn't gain any advantage by transferring there, and the request seemed reasonable, so they approved it. The Pollock Federal Penitentiary could never have imagined that a prison break that would sensationally capture the nation's attention would make this obscure, little-known prison a headline on global news, making it known to everyone. I am Richard. Since my capture in 1988, I have never given up on escaping. I am always ready. I knew I had to escape, and I knew I could. In September 2005, I was officially transferred to Pollock Federal Penitentiary. Based on my previous experience, I knew I had to wait patiently for an opportunity. I thought this wait would take at least several years, but surprisingly, in just 3 months, I sensed an opportunity. Although Pollock Prison was highly secure on the outside, with multiple layers of fences, electric wires, and watchtowers, inside there were several workshops for inmates. During the day, inmates had to work taking on jobs outsourced by the prison, mainly woodworking, metal fabrication, mailbag sorting, and repairs. Just 3 months into my sentence, I was assigned to repair these mailbags. My years of military service taught me a secret, the principle of operational security. It requires collecting fragmented intelligence from various sources. When you have enough information, even if you can't see the full picture, you can at least sketch out a general idea. From my work repairing mailbags, I realized that these bags were eventually shipped out of the prison to a nearby warehouse for storage. Although they had to go through inspections, there was a hidden escape route in this process. I studied various escape methods, digging through walls, tunneling, climbing pipes, scaling walls, picking locks, and so on, but none of these would work in this prison. I thought long and hard. A bold, crazy idea, one that would go down in the annals of escape history, formed in my mind. Mail myself out. With this idea, going to work became the highlight of my day. While repairing mailbags, I pretended to be an exceptionally obedient model inmate, hardworking and uncomplaining, never minding if the work was plentiful, heavy, or dirty. This was to earn the trust of the guards. But secretly, I was closely observing the route of the mailbags. When they were moved by forklift, which ones were sent to the transit warehouse outside the prison, what inspections they passed through, and so on. These were all indispensable parts of my plan. But how could a living person be hidden among mailbags and shipped out? This problem troubled me for a long time. The mailbags weren't big enough to hold a person. And even if one could fit, it would be too obvious. It just wouldn't work. For several months, I couldn't think of a good solution. Finally, I set my sights on the pallet beneath the mailbags. Although the pallet had limited height and couldn't hide things well, it was an excellent weight-bearing device. Coincidentally, I overheard from the workshop foreman that the old, unsorted mailbags would be moved in the coming week to the transit warehouse outside the prison for storage. I knew my chance had come, so I began building my escape pod. Thanks to my hardworking model inmate persona, my workstation was located in a hidden corner of the factory, where I spent my days dealing with moldy, torn mailbags. This gave me more room to maneuver. I was lucky. At that time, other inmates were transferred to higher-paying, sorting jobs, leaving me alone to finish up. I took a large number of discarded mailbags, taped them into a bundle, hollowed out the center, and used plastic sheets, scrap metal, and other supportive materials to create a small space. I then secured it to the pallet with zip ties. Finally, I cut a small entrance at the bottom so I could crawl inside. Although the plan was risky, I could easily be discovered by the guards, or I might suffocate inside. But my life motto is, give me liberty or give me death. But my first escape pod had too little space inside. I couldn't even get in, so I built Escape Pod 2.0. The space was still tight, but I couldn't make it any bigger, or it would be too obvious. After building the escape pod, I began gathering the supplies needed for the escape. A tube for breathing, food, water, a small knife, and so on. These were just for the first phase of my escape. Once I got out of the prison, the authorities would surely launch a massive manhunt. To escape the dragnet, I needed to prepare more things. A regular tracksuit, a tank top, a pair of Adidas sneakers, and a map. These were essential for the second phase of my escape. My original plan was to act on April 1st, because that's April Fool's Day. I thought that when the police first received the report, they might mistake it for a prank, although this possibility was slim. Even if it increased my chances by 1 in 10,000, I had to consider it. However, plans don't always go as expected. That day was a Saturday, and the workshop wasn't open. The plan had to be postponed. At 6 a.m. on April 5th, I woke up excited, had breakfast, and arrived at my workstation at 7:20 a.m. sharp. I secretly hid my food and the tracksuit for my escape. Although the on-duty manager noticed, at that critical moment, my model inmate persona paid off. He didn't investigate further. At 7:50, I used a cart to pull the pallet to my workstation. This scene became the last footage of me captured by the surveillance camera. To ensure someone would move the pallet to the loading dock, I specifically told my supervisor and a few inmates that I was going to the infirmary for a checkup, and I added, the warden said, this pallet must be shipped out with the next transport. Then, I performed my disappearing act. I changed into a tank top, and with great difficulty, climbed into the escape pod, strapping all my tools to my body. Considering that hundreds of mailbags, plus my weight might raise suspicion, I intentionally put a label on the mailbags, FBI, important evidence, Do not touch. After doing all this, I had done everything I could. The rest was up to fate. I was curled up inside the escape pod, my knees touching my forehead, biting on a small tube that led to the pallet below for breathing. In the almost sealed space, every minute felt like an eternity. At 8:35, I suddenly felt the entire pallet being lifted by a forklift and moved around. At that moment, I could hardly contain my joy. If not for the fear of making a sound and exposing myself, I would have cheered out loud. But after the excitement came the agony. After being moved to the loading platform, there was no movement for a whole half hour. Under the scorching sun, the temperature inside the pod soared. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Every breath was a struggle. I could have fainted and died in there at any moment. But my gut told me this was the darkness before the dawn. I had to hold on. Finally, around 9 a.m., the pallet was successfully moved out, passing through several iron gates and finally arriving at the transit warehouse outside the prison. Unfortunately, the warehouse workers were constantly working and talking nearby. I didn't dare make a move. Until around 11 a.m., when the workers went for lunch, I knew this was my chance, considering the prison's routine roll call was at 4 p.m. I had to act fast. I used my small knife to cut the bindings and struggled out of the escape pod. After adjusting to the light outside, my mind raced. The adrenaline rush was so intense that my sense of smell, hearing, and vision became sharper than ever before. Using the cover of bushes, I moved through the building complex, but my path was blocked by a new construction area. My path was cut off. Since I was too exposed, I was stuck there for an hour. Finally, I decided to risk it and head west, crossing the narrow asphalt road that ran through the prison complex, and slipping into a wooded area. To confuse the police dogs, I got down on my hands and knees and crawled in a crisscross pattern, making circles, laying a confusing scent trail. I found a small pond nearby. To further confuse the dogs, I circled the pond several times. Finally, I reached Airbase Road on the south side of the prison. There was a 1.5-meter high-wire fence. Just as I was climbing over it, a woman driving by happened to see me. I knew this was a fatal mistake, but there was nothing I could do. I had to get away as fast as possible. I ran south along the railway tracks, outside the prison. I had studied the route beforehand. I planned to escape to Alexandria, Louisiana first. There were more people and cars. I planned to steal a car, change my clothes, and continue my escape from there. According to my plan, the prison wouldn't discover my absence until 4 p.m. By then, I would be long gone. But unexpectedly, the prison authorities discovered the situation early and immediately issued an escape alert. And the woman who saw me climbing the fence, after seeing the news, also reported it to the police. So by the time I managed to run along the tracks to the vicinity of Ball, Louisiana, near the town of Ball, the authorities had already begun a full-scale search. There were police patrolling near the tracks. Around 4 o'clock, as I was running along the tracks, a police officer suddenly appeared ahead of me. I knew he was there to catch me, but he had probably already seen me. I couldn't run. I had to brace myself and keep moving forward. At that moment, my mind was racing, thinking of various ways to respond. If he came straight at me and tried to handcuff me, I would have to resist and escape. If he just questioned me, there might still be a glimmer of hope. Luckily, he just wanted to ask questions. What followed was my 10-minute standoff with the police. Please enjoy this classic scene.
Is he you live around here, buddy? No. Where you live at?
Down the road by Pineville.
Pineville?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Do you have any form of identification on you?
No, man.
What's your name?
Robert Jones.
Robert Jones?
Uh-huh. Why, I'm not supposed to be on the track?
No, that's not the problem right now. What's your address?
I don't have an address. I'm at the hotel. We're working on houses and stuff like that, the roofing.
What it is, we got an escapee.
Oh, shit. Where from?
Prison.
There's a prison here?
Yeah.
Huh.
Take your glove off.
Okay.
Any tattoos or anything? Look it over. No, he's clean.
Oh, I know something. Jesus. I'm 50 years old.
How old is your guy? You're how old?
50. I was born in 56.
All right, let me just verify. He says his brother's staying at the motel. Let me verify that, and if so, I'll just cut him loose. All right, thanks.
I guarantee I'm not.
You know the bad thing about it?
What's that?
You're matching up to him.
Come on. Well, that sucks, doesn't it?
Yeah. Where are you staying at?
That Titusville or Titus Inn? Titus Inn? A little over.
Where's that at?
I don't even know the address. We just got into town about a week ago, and he dropped me off to jog. I always jog about 12 miles a day.
Where'd he drop you off at?
Up there on that road by, there's some construction going on up there, some houses. And he dropped me off, and he'll be back at the hotel in about probably 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Who y'all work for?
It's his,
I know. What's the name of the company?
Phil's Roofing.
Okay.
Phil's Roofing.
Did you go through a briar patch or something?
Well, yeah, roofing. I always roof in shorts and cut my scratching up on, the roofing.
That's
stuff.
why your knees are all cut up?
Yeah.
Or y'all got pads?
Huh?
Y'all wear pads?
Hell no, too hot. They rub the pads rub your back of your legs and stuff.
Where are you from?
Huh? We're originally Dallas, Texas.
What's your name again?
Jimmy Jones.
Put yourself in my position.
Well, yeah, but I'm not.
I know. I'm not throwing you against them.
Prison escapee?
Hey, you wouldn't believe what them guys do.
Okay.
I mean, they got years and years to think about how they're gonna do it. Now, when I crossed the tracks down there, I saw you running. I said, "Well, how lucky can I be?"
No. I'm not no prison escapee.
Oh, you don't know where you're at?
Yeah, I'm at Ball.
No, I'm talking about you don't know where you're at as far as how far away you are from Hamel.
Well, I would say it's 8 miles.
I'm trying to think where you're gonna hit out at.
Well,
Procter & Gamble.
Right through Pineville, right?
Right, you're gonna be right there at Procter & Gamble.
Walmart and all that stuff.
That's
Yeah.
where you.
So,
Where's y'all's motel at?
okay, let me think now, because like I say, Phil always drives. Okay, Walmart's right there. Go right at Walmart, and there's a road. Is it 165?
Right.
165 that goes south, and we're about 3 blocks. I promise you, I'm not no damn prison escapee.
You'd have done run by now. You know that yourself. You'd have done run by now.
No. Well, if you can't verify me, I'll be at the...
Did you see anybody or anything?
There's some kids up there playing.
That's all you saw?
Yeah.
You
Can
know,
you write down your phone number, your cell phone number, so I can have whoever call you?
just call. You got a cell phone with you?
No, hell no. I don't even have a cell phone or anything.
Just call 911 is all you got to do, and they'll get a hold of us.
All right.
That's our quick line there.
You have a good day now.
Be careful, buddy.
Thank you.
All right.
After watching the video, I wonder how you would rate my performance. Anyway, I'm quite satisfied with my own performance. I'd give it a 9 out of 10. I used my pre-prepared knowledge of the terrain to handle the questioning, pretending to be a local jogger. I also perfectly explained the scrapes on my knees, saying they were from roofing work. The entire process was calm and easygoing. I even joked several times. Actually, you all might have noticed that I made some critical mistakes. At the beginning, I made up a name for myself, Robert Jones. But as we talked, I actually forgot it and said my name was Jimmy Jones. But perhaps because the officer had been talking to me for so long, he forgot about that too. That's how I managed to get away with it. Another factor was that the black and white photo the prison sent to the police was extremely low resolution, too blurry. And it was taken 6 months earlier, making it impossible for him to see details. Therefore, the officer couldn't be sure of the escapee's appearance. Just like that, with my calm performance and years of studying psychological details, I successfully fooled the officer and walked right out of the encirclement. Finally, I disappeared right under the police's noses, regaining my freedom. On April 8, 2006, 3 days after the escape, the TV show America's Most Wanted aired an urgent special on Richard's escape, calling on the public to provide any leads to bring this cunning fugitive to justice. 5 days later, the U.S. Marshals Service officially placed Richard on its 15 Most Wanted Fugitives list, offering a $25,000 reward. They also pointed out that he was the first inmate since 1991 to escape from a federal prison. Law enforcement across the nation quickly mobilized for the manhunt, setting up a nationwide dragnet. As the situation grew more intense, 2 weeks later, Richard fled from Washington State to the province of British Columbia in Canada. There, he decided to repeat his old trick of stealing cars and wandering around. But unexpectedly, his first car theft in a foreign country drew the attention of the police. Although he managed to escape, 2 days later, Canadian police, thanks to the America's Most Wanted broadcast, identified the car thief from the U.S. as the wanted fugitive Richard. After that, Canadian police focused on tracking his movements. The U.S. also sent officers across the border to assist. As the search tightened, Richard felt that life in Canada was becoming too difficult. So he employed a diversionary tactic, a reverse maneuver, and secretly slipped back into the U.S., continuing his hiding in plain sight strategy. And that's not all. After leaving several clues across various U.S. states, he slipped back into Canada again. I have to say, this move was absolutely brilliant. But the U.S. authorities were determined to bring him to justice, no matter where he was. America's Most Wanted and major broadcast news media repeatedly covered the case, tracking it in depth. This meant that Richard couldn't dare stay in one place for long. Whenever a new episode about him aired, he would stock up on food and fill his gas tank, always ready to run. He himself said, "If the show covers my case, I'll lay extremely low for the next few days." Although his car theft skills were excellent, having worked as a car salesman in his youth, he knew where car dealerships kept their cash and keys. He only stole new cars with fake GPS locators, and always chose the common color of white. He was also skilled at disguise, making his own fake IDs. But being constantly on the run wasn't a permanent solution. He considered using a fake identity to settle down near Williston Lake, in British Columbia. Buying a remote piece of land, the area had only one road in and out, was quite arid, and had a beetle infestation. Coupled with the intense manhunt, he didn't dare take the risk, and could only continue to wander. Eventually, driving a stolen car, he traveled from Western Canada to the east, changing cars along a 5,000-kilometer journey. He finally arrived in the province of New Brunswick. Perhaps tired from running, he rested there for 2 months. This time, he didn't stay in hotels. Instead, he stole a relatively new white van and lived in it. When he had free time, he would ride a bicycle. He thought this would be more discreet and safe, but he never expected this van to become his nightmare. Time flew by to October 24, 2007. In the Nash Creek area of New Brunswick, an off-duty RCMP officer, Dan, noticed a high-end white van parked on the side of the road. The rear window was haphazardly covered with cheap, poor-quality tint film. This aroused his suspicion. He suspected the vehicle was stolen and was being used for smuggling alcohol or cigarettes. He jotted down the license plate number and alerted other officers. The next day, another RCMP officer, Stefan, noticed the same van in downtown Campbellton. Noticed this vehicle. Young and fearless, he immediately began a pursuit. With the help of other officers, 852, 025, 933 to 0 hours, 30 minutes and 27 seconds, 400, they successfully forced the vehicle to a stop and arrested Richard without incident. It's worth noting that when he was caught, he didn't put up a fight. His mood was quite good. He just felt that his luck had run out. He even praised the officer who spotted him for being diligent and having a sharp eye. And so, after a year and a half on the run, Richard was finally caught. Upon hearing the news, the U.S. authorities were ecstatic. They immediately began extradition proceedings with Canada. Since Richard's crimes in Canada were mostly car and property theft, and he hadn't committed any capital offenses, therefore, the Canadian authorities promptly extradited him back to the United States. Richard was already serving 2 life sentences, and with 3 escapes on his record, adding more time to his sentence was largely meaningless. After this capture, only a few symbolic years were added. On April 18, 2008, he was transferred to the Florence Supermax prison. This facility, known as a Supermax prison, or the Alcatraz of the Rockies, is one of the highest security prisons in the entire United States, specifically designed to house some of the most uncontrollable and dangerous criminals. To this day, no one has ever successfully escaped from here. Considering Richard's history of escapes, the authorities gave him special attention, placing him in an extremely high-end solitary cell. The cell had only one window, a mere 10-centimeter wide slit. Even on a sunny day, sunlight could only enter for a few minutes. He was only allowed 1 hour of recreation time per day. The other 23 hours were spent locked in his solitary cell. Even his 3 meals were delivered by guards to his door. He was forbidden from interacting with other inmates, completely eliminating any possibility of escape. Perhaps Richard still had thoughts of escaping, but faced with this hellish level of difficulty, he was probably helpless. Regarding this extreme confinement, Richard once said, "It's absolutely terrifying. I have personally witnessed one of the inmates gradually lose his mind. He went from being barely able to function normally, developing auditory hallucinations and paranoia." In 2008, crime reporter Byron tried to correspond with Richard in prison. He didn't have high hopes, but to his surprise, Richard replied, and he was very enthusiastic. He not only shared, without reservation, the entire process of his 3 escapes, but also laid out his psychological state and planning details one by one. After 5 years of correspondence, Byron received a total of over 340 letters from Richard, amounting to more than 3,000 pages. Eventually, these letters were compiled into an ebook, which was officially published in 2013. The book's title is The Widely Known The Man Who Mailed Himself Out of Prison. And during these 5 years, Richard was kept in solitary confinement, unable to communicate with anyone. This might be why he was willing to correspond with Byron and tell his story. After all, humans are social creatures. Long-term lack of interaction can drive you crazy. After the ebook The Man Who Mailed Himself Out of Prison was released, it received a massive response, even becoming well known within the prison system. It's unclear if it was due to pressure or if Richard had indeed been behaving himself, but in September 2013, he was finally released from extreme isolation and moved to a general population cell, able to interact normally with other inmates. He said that at that moment he felt reborn. As the book became a hit, his story began to spread widely in documentaries and the media. Although he himself was behind bars, he was hailed as America's greatest escape artist, becoming a celebrity in prison. In 2020, the paperback version of the book was released and became a bestseller again, further boosting his fame outside of prison. Although the Alcatraz of the Rockies is heavily guarded and somewhat inhumane, Richard's mindset in prison was quite good. He even remarked, "I'm thankful for the existence of this prison. It houses so many extremely dangerous individuals, monsters you would never want near your family or in society." In November 2022, given Richard's good behavior over the past 14 years, at the age of 64, he was transferred out of the Florence Supermax prison and placed in a nearby federal prison with a slightly lower security level. A year later, he was transferred twice more and is currently incarcerated at McCreary U.S. Penitentiary in Kentucky. Although this prison is still a medium to high security facility, it is much more lenient than a Supermax prison. At 67 years old, Richard is now elderly, and it's unlikely he has the urge to climb through windows or crawl into crates. His next parole hearing will be in 2028. It remains to be seen if, at the age of 70, he will be able to legally walk out of prison. Finally, let's take another look at that widely circulated classic scene. The officer who initially stopped Richard near the railway tracks was named Carl Bordelon. Although he let Richard go, looking at the entire questioning process, he was actually quite diligent and professional. He acted professionally, therefore he was not held accountable for the incident. In fact, due to his good performance and diligent work, he was promoted to Assistant Chief of Police. However, on January 10th, 2015, he passed away from a heart attack while on duty, at the young age of 52. That's all for this story. Please support us with a like, share, and subscribe. Your clicks are the greatest encouragement for me. This is DarkCaseX, and I'll see you next time.